Well, good afternoon, West Ham fans. It's going to be a busy week this week, I think. A very good Monday lunchtime to you, one and all. Yes, this morning I spoke about the West Ham-itis, the London Stadium-itis, in terms of looking at some of the data between the 9 full month. Start again. The 9 full seasons at the London Stadium compared to the last 9 full Premier League seasons in Upton Park, and pretty much showing there was nothing's changed. Nothing's changed. The only thing that's changed is we're getting thumped a lot more, which explains why fans are leaving, earlier and stuff. Because, if you're losing 1-0 or 2-1, rather than losing 3-0 or 4-0, you're going to hang around because you might catch something. You might and even more so because you might at Upton Park you might want to leave earlier because the transport links were so shit, and you get a jump on that big queue outside Upton Park station, but that wasn't the case. That wasn't the case according to the stats. But this week, I think we are staring down at possibly one of the biggest weeks in over a decade at West Ham. We're in. The club on the pitch is in freefall. We've got a manager on the brink. We've got fans preparing protests, a boardroom under fire. What happens, I think, over the next few days will decide whether we rise or collapse into complete chaos, in all honesty. This week is absolutely make or break for West Ham, I think. We'll look at the crisis on the pitch. We've obviously got the fan protests, and what changes could be coming. Now, obviously, starting with the football, 3-0 defeat to Spurs wasn't just a bad day. It was the latest chapter in over 18 months of regression. 4 defeats in our opening 5 Premier League games. We're stuck in the relegation zone. I granted it's only 4 games in, but still, once upon a time, 40 points was a survival mark. Maybe 35, 36 for this season. It's looking competitive already. You're probably going to be needing about 40 to completely guarantee you staying up. So here's the question: do we have it in us to win 10 or 11 games? Based on what I've seen so far, probably not. That could easily change. We all had high hopes coming out of that Nottingham Forest game. Although, was it a blip? I don't know. Only in hindsight, it's going to tell. We've got Crystal Palace coming up next, and it's a must-win game. Palace under Glasner have been efficient. They're well organised, hard to break down. A manager I'd love to have been in charge at West Ham, in all honesty. Even after losing key players like Eze and stuff, they seem to have ridden that well. Compared to us, chaotic defending, no real cutting edge up front, and a team that looks out of ideas, I'll be honest. And if we don't get 3 points there, we've got Everton away and Arsenal away as well, and things could easily spiral very, very fast, particularly in football, where results are based on a almost a match by match basis. Really, we were down after the Chelsea game, we were up after the Forest game, and they were back down after the Tottenham Hotspur game. We're like this. It is like a roller coaster. So that brings us obviously on to Potter. Most fans agree he might not be the complete root of all West Ham's problems so far, but he's definitely a big part of them. Since arriving in January, 6 wins in 24 games, only 2 of those have come at home. And that's relegation form when you look at that. If we started the season, we'd play 24 games and we only won 6 of them, and only won 2 at home. That is relegation form. Zonal marking at corners has been a disaster. 6 goals conceded from 32 corners. Just over 1 in every 5 corners we concede. Loyalty to JWP is baffling supporters, and when we go into a game, and I mentioned it about playing without a recognised striker. Spurs didn't play with a recognised striker either, but Potter, himself admitted he can finally be judged this season after a full pre-season and turn it and bring in some of his own players. That's what was said. Judges, and we are judging him now. But I think the excuses are gone now. There's got to be, he's got to deliver. It seems the media are turning on him. Match the day pundits said his time could be up. And again, we'll probably talk about that more in Hammer's headlines, really. Reports claim the board already considering replacements. And again, we'll talk about that in Hammer's headlines. I think unless Potter pulls off a huge turnaround this week, the time could be coming to an end. And I'm not one of these. I never like to call out managers and say to managers be sacked and stuff, but I'm not seeing the progression, that I was enthused with when he came in, and I'm seeing glimpses. You know what I mean? 20 minutes here, that first 20 minutes on Saturday was good. Was nice football. I think I've seen glimpses of. Obviously, we've seen the guys he's brought in. In terms of the guys he's actually brought in, Mads, jury's still out very much so. Diouf gonna be a good player. He's a good player already. Fernandez looks an exceptional talent, and Mayasa with his small little cameo on Saturday looks like someone who's gonna make an impact. And him alongside of Fernandez, I don't think there's an excuse now not to play him now, particularly with *𝗪𝗏. His red card. And that's what I was saying yesterday. That could benefit us tremendously, that red card, because there's no excuse. There's no comfort blanket. He can't play *𝗪𝗏. He can't bring him into the side or bring him off the bench because he's not there for the next 3 games. So Mayasa and Fernandez has to be the way to go. Has to be. Then we look at upstairs, the problems at West Ham, we know, go deeper than the manager. The fans are furious with the ownership. Said there was a vote of no confidence delivered by the key supporter groups. We know the club. Baroness Brady met directly with supporters last week, which is not necessarily an unprecedented move, because she does tend to be that sort of link between the board and the supporters. But for her to go specifically rather than a board appointed member shows to me that there's seriousness in terms of that. Now the minutes this week, the official minutes are due to be published, which I think will be interesting, and that they could potentially be explosive. There was chatter on social media that part of it was Brady handing in a resignation. I can't see that happening, in all honesty. But the first time we might be seeing some genuine steps towards some sort of change in terms of day-to-day running of West Ham. And that coincides with the Crystal Palace game, where protests are being planned. Hammers United, starting from the Crystal Palace game. They will be releasing a statement, I think, this week with details of those protests. And I hope everyone has the right to protest, and I hope those protests are peaceful, because the last thing you want to do is give any fuel to fire from the media on those, and I'm sure people would respect that and make them peaceful. We don't want a repeat of what happened at Burnley. It was ugly scenes, and it painted the supporters as villains by the media, and that you don't want that. You don't want that to fuel any fire. I hope if it is a strategy, it's controlled, it's professional, and it's peaceful, because that's the important things. So, with everything colliding together this week, I can see it being a massive week, pardon the pun, in terms of West Ham being massive. On the pitch, Potter needs a win to save his job, I think, and kickstart our survival fight. And it is it's crazy to think 5 games in, but it is a survival fight. It looks like a very competitive Premier League season this season. You're not going to get, I don't think, people drifting off early doors. You can argue the only week that this comes close in recent memory, probably the playoff 2012. But even that wasn't as, I think, as future defining in terms of the whole club from top to bottom as it is this week. It's more than just 3 points on Saturday. I think it's about the direction of West Ham. But what I've got a big question for you guys. Should Potter, and I think I probably know the answer. I don't know where I've asked it, but I'll ask it because I'd be interested to get people's opinions. Should Potter be given more time, or has he had his chance? I want to hear, from every one of you, really, in terms of what you have to say about it. If you, are you thinking this week could be as seismic as I think? I just think it could. I just think there's you think of how everything is lining up, and it does seem to be a big week. And the best thing to do is make sure you're on top of everything. Watching our channels and everyone else's channels, because it's you think it's going to be a big week this week. We know the reaction to it said, I think it was last week, was the weekend before last, they had an emergency board meeting on the basis of all the media that was coming out, and that was, Daniel Krasinski was in person at that meeting. He did personally attend, which is very unusual. He tends to be very much a silent partner, but he was getting involved there as well. And it does seem that things are cranking up on, in terms of in the dugout and in the boardroom, and that's just observing what's been said and what's being, there's no special information or anything I've got. It's just, combinations and adding things together, and it does seem to be all piling up. And you want to make sure you're watching on Saturday, innit, the game, because I think it's going to be a cauldron of an atmosphere, positive or negative, particularly off the back of the protest as well. That will jeer up the supporters into the crowd, into the game as well. And but come 3 o'clock, come that whistle, everyone behind the team, because they need that support from us for sure. Spilling that into the game itself, I don't think benefits the players personally. But when 3 o'clock, it's all about the team, not the regime for that. Anyway, I'll be back with Hammer's headlines, talking about some of I've touched here, really, a bit about the BBC and match of the day, and they always gives me a good barometer, really, in terms of when a manager is maybe on the brink, when people like BBC get involved in the discussion. And don't forget to like, comment, share, and give us your comments below. And thank you to all you subscribers. We smashed past 28,000 subscribers this weekend. So I know I'd rather have won the game than hit 28,000 subscribers. But thank you for that as well. And speak to you soon. Much love. Bye-bye.